Hey everyone, welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. I'm Tracy Friedlander, and today I have Murray Hidary on the show. Murray is the creator of the music experience called Mind Travel, which I randomly found out about on Instagram. His feed has beautiful photos of people on beaches with tiki torches while listening to him play piano. I had to know what this was all about. From the feed, I could tell that the concerts were sort of a meditation experience, which I thought was brilliant. But I wanted to know more about this business idea, and I wanted to know, how did Murray come up with this idea? So I reached out to him and asked him for an interview. What I found out was incredible. In the very traditional crushing classical style, his is a story of a composer and pianist who got to the music school graduation finish line and realized he did not like the choices for composer careers. So he opted for a completely different route, but always kept playing piano even in his office as a stress reliever. But what came next in the story is totally unique. Today, he tells the story of how his playing became a journey of self-discovery and healing that actually led him to what was next in his career at age 40. Not only that, through the journey, Murray created not just a new career in music, but he created a movement and found his life purpose. To find out more about Murray and his concert experiences, go to murrayhidary.com, and if you are in New York next Thursday, May 10th, he's performing for free in Central Park. Find out more information on the episode and in the show notes and on his website. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Fix Music for being a sponsor of Crushing Classical Podcast. Fixmusic.com is your online resource for high-quality sheet music at great prices. Check out their latest offerings like hard-to-get music and frequently backordered parts. Fix also offers unique solutions for teachers and schools buying music. Whether you have a large private teaching studio or you run a music program, Fix has a solution for you. Contact them through their website for more information. And Fix now offers free shipping on all domestic orders. Also, remember to use the special discount link in the show notes and get 10% off your order. And Drone Tuner, an incredible revolutionary tuner app, is now available in the Apple App Store. You may be thinking, another tuner app? Why do I need this one? Let me tell you why. Do you tune with a drone or constant tone coming out of your tuner? Are you tired of that nasty mechanical sound? This app has samples of recorded live musicians for your drone work. It is such a pleasure to tune to a sound that is your exact instrument. Not only that, the visuals on this app are super fast and the reaction time is like no other tuner app on the market. You can tune intervals and chords within a key, so you know if your major thirds are too sharp or just right. You can tune using vibrato if you play with vibrato, and you can even tune a chord with a friend. People are already in love with this app. Some things people are saying about Drone Tuner: best app ever. I have never felt more comfortable playing in ensembles after using this app for just a few weeks. And I used the Drone Tuner to tune my college orchestra this morning. Worked great with the iPad 4. Check out our website, dronetunerapp.com, to see video tutorials on how the app works, or check out the videos in the App Store. Drone Tuner is currently available on iOS for iPhone and iPad. Get yours today at the iTunes App Store. The link is in the show notes. Let's get started. Welcome, Murray. Thanks for being on Crushing Classical. How are you?
Hi, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you. Murray Hidary. Is that how you say your last name?
Exactly. Very good. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I am so happy that you're on the show. I've never met you, and I found you on Instagram. So it's like so exciting that Instagram works like that. Like I randomly stumbled upon your feed through just, I don't know, searching and discovered what you do. And I just thought it was so creative and cool that a pianist composer has created this unique way of getting your art out there. So can you tell me, I would explain it, but I think you're going to do a way better job of explaining what it is that you're doing right now. So
Sure. Sure. Although it's very fun to hear other people explain it because sometimes they phrase things in ways that I didn't even think of,
oh,
which is so, but which by the way is so great about art and music generally, right? Because it's so much about your relative perspective on the
yeah.
experience as opposed to dictating the experience. But no, I mean, I like to tell people that I'm in the people moving business, and they look at me like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm interested in moving people, and when I say moving people, not physically, although I like to move. I like when they do move physically through movement in the mind travel experiences. But really, it's about moving them emotionally through music. And so I'm in the people moving business, and I just happen to do it through music, which is an interesting frame because you might on the surface think that if you're a musician or a composer, that you just do music. That's what you
Right.
do.
You don't
And
usually
then
think honestly about the other
right,
people. I hate to say it,
right,
but
right, right.
you think
And
about like,
well,
hopefully there'll be people there for me.
that's right. And I think that was a big flip of the frame for me,
Hmm.
if you will, which is this experience when I chose to make it public. And it was really about how to create participants in an experience. And it was really less about me. Most, especially in the classical world, but also in other genres, of course, you have performers, you have entertainers,
Hmm.
and it's very much about, hey, check out what I can do. How about how I play this Chopin piece? About
Yeah.
how I, my technique, and and that's all wonderful. And by the way, it's very inspirational. And you see
Right.
some of these pianists, the way they play, it's mind blowing. It's gorgeous. I was going after something a little bit different. And of course, it has to have a world class musicianship to it. And it has to have, there's a technical aspect to it. But
Hmm.
the technical aspect is in service of something else, something I think greater than just the craft. And it's about this human connection that I'm trying and I'm aspiring to create, and using the music as the medium through which to do that. So that's a bit of a different kind of way I approach it philosophically, just going into it to begin with. For many, many years, mind travel was, well, first of all, it didn't have a name, and it was just a personal ritual, a personal musical ritual, if you will, that I just did on my own at the
Hmm.
end of each day, to check in, to express my emotions, to de-stress, to just be human through music.
Yeah.
And of course, as a composer, as a musician, that was my outlet since I was a little kid. That was my outlet. I always felt that music did a better job at conveying my emotional state, and over time my spiritual state, than words could, for me.
Yeah,
Right? Is that
and
great?
I think so many musicians feel that
Yeah.
with their experience of how they've become a musician. Like I know that I felt, especially during my like teenage years, I just felt like music really spoke to me in a way and it fed me in a different way that I could from, like you said,
Right.
words. So I love that you took that and you made it into a career. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's incredible that you
Yeah.
connected those two.
And the step between taking that and making it a career was making it an experience, a very immersive experience.
So,
Something.
so can you
Yeah.
describe the experience that you
Yeah.
provide for your concert goers?
Yeah.
Would you
So
call them
let's go
concert
through that.
goers?
So, yeah, I call them participants,
Okay.
and I call them participants as opposed to audience, because audience again is part of that old paradigm, that old
Mm.
model of
Yeah.
entertainer, performer, and audience, with a stage and a separation between the two. And so I really do my best, and of course it's tough. I mean, I still do play in theaters, in large theaters, so it's there is a stage many
Mm-hmm.
times, and it's so there is that element, but the shift from audience to participant really takes place through an invitation that I offer, and that I do in the introduction, in the talking that I do before the music begins. And a lot of musicians either don't do that, or they if they do an introduction, it's just the name of the program, a little bit
Right.
about the program. But I kind of go a little bit further, and I really try to set the intention of what we're doing there. Why are we there? And once you do that, and you create an invitation for them to become part of it, as just opposed to passive listeners, I try to shift them from passive listeners to active listeners.
Mm.
And there is a difference. There
Oh
is a
yeah.
very serious difference. And I don't mean by active listener like, hey, listen to the harmonic changes and to I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about active listeners in terms of deep contemplation of their own life, their own circumstances, and using the music as a space to really work through that journey and come out the other side, it's somewhat different, somewhat transformed, or at least the issue you're dealing with has been transformed through the musical journey. So it's a specific invitation with a specific intent. And that usually does the trick in my experience. And I've done mind travel now. We're on a over 250th concert. So it's we've been around the block, so to speak. And to get to the experience, by the way. So So your audience is like, what the hell did I do?
It sounds cool, but what is it?
So basically, my main instrument is the piano. That is my instrument of choice. I grew up playing the cello as well. I love strings, and I do score. I love scoring for strings and orchestra. But the piano became the core instrument, like most composers, and primarily because I just started to sit at the piano and improvise. And these improvisational sessions went longer and longer over time to where I would, be playing for over an hour. And that musical journey that I would take myself through, again, as that personal ritual, is something that was very helpful to me, healing for me, transformative for me. And it's that experience from first note to last note, uninterrupted. There's no, it's not 5-10 minute pieces that I just do in succession. They're not memorized. Each one is what I call a real-time composition. So it's in a musical language that I've developed. And it has, a series of influences, and we can go into that later. But that language is what I emote in, what I express in. And so if you came to several different mind travel experiences, you would recognize the language. You would say, yes, that's Murray, that's mind travel. Okay. But each one would have its own personality. Awesome. Right? In the same way that I use the same words in the English language, my fluent language, I use the same words in lots of different combinations and ways to express different ideas from one conversation to another.
That's a great way to explain it. Right. How it's like a totally different experience, yet it's still similar because of the influences and the language that you use.
And the building blocks of it, right? I mean, so much of the, I'm very influenced by, the minimalist movement, kind of post-minimalism, as well as a lot of Eastern music and Eastern traditions. And so there's these patterns and musical blocks, like Lego blocks, that I've developed and I keep developing. I keep creating and finding new ones. And then they become part of my lexicon, my musical lexicon that I draw upon. And just find their way, woven throughout the music. So that's what's happening on a experiential musical level. And then the setting for that is the other half of the equation. So,
which is what I saw in the pictures, which I was like, wow, that's really neat. So tell me about the settings.
So, I'm interested, like we started this conversation off, Tracy, by saying I'm in the people moving business. So part of the equation, the formula for moving people is not only the music, it's also the setting and where we're doing it and the space around them, the physical space around them. Mm-hmm. And so I certainly do it in iconic, gorgeous theaters, from Lincoln Center to the Ace Theater here in Los Angeles. I mean, just incredible architecture, incredible spaces. And we create magic there. But I also am inspired by nature, and I want to bring people and the music out into nature. Mm. The problem is that nature poses some very significant logistical and acoustic challenges.
Right.
So the first one I had the idea for was to bring people to Santa Monica Beach, right near the pier, that iconic view of the sunset and the California sunset, on the beach. And so I was like, how am I going to do a concert here that's going to have the acoustic integrity and the experiential integrity? And so at first I was like, well, I can't, Steinway, as much as they love me and they provide pianos for me, they're not going to, I'm going to call them up and be like, hey, can you send a Steinway down to the beach?
I'll be careful not to get any sand on it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not going to happen. And even if I could, you wouldn't even hear it. Because the beach is a terrible acoustic environment. It's windy. The ocean is actually quite loud. And so that wouldn't work. And then say we amplified it whether we amplify an acoustic piano or we amplify a keyboard with speakers. The speakers are just, they get lost, and there's nothing to contain the sound. So again, horrible acoustics. And I was like, oh, it's too bad. It really would have been beautiful. And then it hit me. I was like, what if the entire audience was wearing headphones? And so we create this pristine acoustic and intimate acoustic experience for each person. And immediately they're dropped into this internal kind of presence. Yeah. And so I said, okay, how am I going to get, what could be hundreds and hundreds of people? So at first we're like, okay, we'll go up to the cloud, and the problem is that if you have everyone use their own headphones and their phones, and you send them to a link to live stream it, the problem is there's actually about a 10-second latency delay.
Yeah.
And so now it becomes like a really bad martial arts movie, dubbed. And, so I'm playing, and then you hear it like 10 seconds later.
I've seen those Instagram videos. You're like, I can't even watch that. He's up here, and the notes are down here. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so it's like, bad.
That's not going to work. So that's how I came up with using the radio frequency, which essentially we become our own radio station at the beach. And now everyone is instant synced, listening to the same thing at the same time, and it's totally connective. And so that's why now we do so many massive outdoor experiences, from Santa Monica Beach to, in just a couple of weeks, we're doing Central Park in New York City. And,
oh my gosh.
We'll have 1,000 people with headphones, all listening. And what's so magical is that we found a way to drop people into their internal world instantly. When you put a set of headphones on, you just go internally right away.
I have to interject like that. Yeah. I remember, excuse me, listening to music in the listening lab way back when you had to do that in music school, and listening to Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony and having a completely different experience than I'd ever had.
Absolutely.
So the headphones
you hear
idea
it on
is
such
awesome.
an intimate level.
Yes.
And you have this intimate personal experience, and then something happens. And it's a different point in the journey for everyone. But at some point, you look up and you see hundreds upon hundreds of other people also having a personal, intimate experience. And you realize that you're all having that experience together. And this feeling of connection is forged. And it's something you get, not something you intellectualize. You really get it very deeply. And that's where the magic of the experience happens. And that's what we go for, and that's what's been so fulfilling about it when I get to see. Yeah,
it sounds like you're so fulfilled, and I'm getting chills while you describe it. So, oh my gosh, I want to talk more about mind travel, but first I want to find out how you got to the point where you created mind travel, because you're a composer, you're a pianist. That means you went to music school.
Yes.
So, how did you go from music school to, I created this amazing career? I mean, because there's a lot that happens in between there. So can you kind of sum up, but like start with that moment. We talked about it earlier on a different call where you described what it was like to come out of school and realize what your career choices were as a composer and a pianist. And I know a lot of my audience members are composers, conductors, pianists, people who know that there's certain instruments that there's more choices, and then there's certain ones that only have a couple. So tell me about that.
So I grew up playing since I was 6 years old, and then in high school I knew I wanted to be a composer, meaning I felt I had something to say musically that was original, that as opposed to interpreting the music of others. So that was my realization in high school. Then I needed the skills to express what I was hearing in my head, what I was feeling and hearing. And then, so I did end up studying to be classical composition at New York University. And that was, that's what I studied there. When I graduated, I was like, how am I going to make any money with classical music?
Right.
Particularly what I was doing, which was, really kind of, avant-garde, like progressive stuff. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I would speak to other composers, from the program years later that have, been out there for years. And a lot of them would go into writing, commercials and jingles and TV stuff. And if that's your goal, it's awesome. it wasn't what I felt was my calling.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would speak to them, and they would tell me that, I would ask them like, so, okay, you're doing all this, you're making good money. So when did you write your first symphony? And they look at me like I have 12 heads, and they'd be like, oh, there's no time for that. Like they're always on deadline, and
Mm-hmm.
they're making good money, but they're always on deadline, and they're just back to back to back to back. And the more successful they are, the more on deadline they are, right? Bigger
Mm-hmm.
projects, bigger
Right.
budgets, bigger. So I kind of got that message at 21 years old from several people, and I was like, oh my God, that would be like a form of torture to me, to be like writing music every day, but not the music I wanted to write.
Mm.
So I, I just had to make a separation between how I was going to make a living and the music I wanted to write. And that's not a choice for everyone, but that was my choice at the time. And I was teaching, so a lot of people will go into teaching, and I did teach. I had about a dozen or so private students at a college, and I was teaching kids to young adults, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it, but it didn't give me kind of the resources, right, the income I would need to really lead the life I wanted to in terms of the big ideas I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sharing this frustration, this dilemma, with my brother Jack, and he's 3 years older. At the time, he was about 24, 25 years old. I was 21 or 22, and he was working for the National Institutes of Health, which is the government research down in Bethesda, Maryland. And he was doing government research in the medical field, and because of that, he was one of the first in the early and mid 90s to see this thing called the internet, which we now take for granted.
Mm.
And so he tells me, "Hey, Murray, have you ever heard of the internet?" And it sounds absolutely insane to even ask that question or hear that question now. But it was the answer to that was, "What is it?" That was my
Yeah.
answer to that question. Basically, tell me what it is again. And so remind me.
Remind me of
So
that thing.
what is it? So he took me through it, and I was like, oh my God, that's fascinating. We were both, like so enamored by its possibility, a sense of possibility. And we come from kind of a family of entrepreneurs, my dad and his father, my grandfather, so we it was very natural for us to be like, I don't know, let's just jump in and see what this is going to become.
Yeah.
And there was, by the way, that was a time when all these companies hadn't gone public yet, and there was no Google, didn't exist.
Mm.
There was none of that was around. So we just jumped in, and we were in our early 20s, and we just had the journey at the time of our lives, building that and getting investors and building our company, which we eventually were able to take that company public and subsequently sell the company, and all through those years. I would end each day on a piano in my office that I kept there, and I would just play this exact kind of free form, improvised style that was continuing to develop from college through really till today.
Mm.
And that's where it all happened, was in those late night hours, night after night, where I was de-stressing from the 13 the 14-hour work days of a startup company.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a way for me to do something exciting in the technology world, and also maintain my music on my own terms.
Wow.
And that was back then. I mean, today it's actually a lot easier to do that, because it's now so much easier to work remotely. It's so much easier to structure, to create a life around balancing your passions, your vocation, and your passion. So it's a lot easier now than it even was then. And so that's the choice I made then. And then I was able to score and write stuff for incredible groups of musicians, and I would get stuff recorded and performed, and I didn't have to worry as much about am I getting paid enough in a commission or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. But I got to write what I wanted to write on my own terms, and find musicians that felt equally passionate about it to perform it.
So
Like
you
to
were
like yeah.
so if you had to give some advice to musicians today, it sounds like you would recommend something similar. Like it almost sounds like you were able to keep your or develop your own voice because you weren't having to work for somebody else.
Yeah, and I was able to develop my own musical voice because that's all I did was I was invested in my musical voice. To me, my musical voice, that exploration was religion to me.
Mm.
I mean, literally, it was religion to me. It was from as a teenager. Again, that same time in high school when I realized I wanted to be a composer. It's not just because I wanted to write my own stuff and whatever. It was the same time that I started my spiritual exploration. I
Hmm.
grew up with Orthodox Judaism, and while I loved the culture, the traditions, the family-based values, which we're still an incredibly close family, my entire family. Spiritually, I didn't connect with it in that way, and I did turn to Eastern philosophies, to Zen Buddhism, to other philosophies, to really find and fill that seeking within me.
Hmm.
Then I got to the music of those traditions. So I studied throughout my 20s. I studied the musical repertoire of the Zen monks of Japan,
Wow.
dating back to the 17th and 18th centuries, through the instrument, the shakuhachi, the Japanese flute, the Japanese bamboo flute. And I had to study the music and read Japanese notation. It's in kind of like kanji and the different Japanese characters, musical characters. So that started to influence my music as well. And so um, it really was a religion for me. So I had to explore it on those existential terms.
Hmm.
And that's why it had to be pure, because I was searching for myself, my true identity. I was searching for my spiritual identity. It wasn't like a gig, It wasn't like it was.
Wow.
It was
Yeah.
like I need to find my place in the world, and the only way I know how to do it is through music. So uh, I can't. That's why you get musicians and composers who go crazy, because they're so idealistic about their craft, because it really is religion.
Mm.
It's nothing shy of that. And so, in the same way that you can't tell someone who's religious in their respective religion, like they take it seriously, because
Right.
it's as they should.
But you
So
know what I find so fascinating about you, and we're gonna, I mean, we'll go toward the direction of like how you created the business of mind travel. But what I find so fascinating is that as you did this, as you just discovered your own musical language, and you were doing it for your own personal religious development, like religion in the
mhm.
sense of spirituality.
Yeah,
A lot of people, I think, would then make the next step is I'm going to write a symphony based on these new things that I'm feeling, and then try to
right,
get people to have that
right,
and perform that
yes,
for me. Like that. I think
yeah.
that would be like the logical thing that most people would do. So how did you realize that that wouldn't necessarily I don't know if it would not work. It might work, but how did you
Yeah.
realize that it wasn't going to be enough, I guess maybe?
Well, and that's spot on. That's actually how I thought it would happen. That's how I
Uh-huh.
thought about it back
Right.
then.
Cuz that seems
Um,
like the next step, right? Like
that's right. Just to create something so powerful, some orchestral experience, something just so profound, powerful, on the scale of a Beethoven's Ninth,
yeah,
a
cuz
Mahler's Fifth.
I think some musicians have personally had
Yes,
spiritual experiences listening to
yes,
Mahler 5 on headphones, and then they go, oh my
that's
God,
right.
I want to do that, and I want those people to feel that. But they can't make that happen. So I think a lot of times musicians feel that angst and that, like, oh, it's not happening the way I thought it would. Like, I want
Yeah,
everyone to feel what I'm feeling. And then
yeah.
it becomes so self centered. And so you were able to, like, turn it around and make it about them and still do your thing. So that's what's brilliant
Yeah.
about it, honestly.
So, so thank you. So what I'll let me share kind of the thought process there, because
Okay.
it's rooted in something deeper and philosophically. So as I was exploring this spiritual path,
Hmm.
the not only the teachings, but my experience with the teachings was that of it was something that you had to really feel, meaning once you get into traditions that include meditation, that include deep contemplation, it's no longer just devotional. So if you look at a lot of Western music, our tradition, our beautiful tradition of classical kind of music, traditionally it's has a devotional underpinning, from Bach, all the way through, even till today. You've got every major composer did, from passions to looking
Masses.
at all the masses,
Yeah.
to requiems, right? Everyone did it. I mean, just awesome, right? So, and then if you're Jewish, like you pick something, like you're Steve Reich, you pick Tehillim and the Kaddish, and you have these beautiful liturgical passages that you score, and it's quite devotional and wonderful in that sense. For me, where it started to shift was that I started to really feel something different within me. And it happened when I was playing. It happened when I was on these kind of long, extended improvisational, kind of jaunts. And so it was a process that began to heal me. And it culminated, I would say, about now 10, 11 years ago. It kind of came to a real head when I use the music and what I do with the music in this kind of, personal ritual performance that I did at home. I used it to heal myself from really what was the most challenging time in my life, which was getting through the death of my youngest sister, who died tragically. And I didn't know how to get my life back after that. It was just devastating, particularly because I was with her at the time of an accident in another country. And so I dealt with not only her loss, but also kind of the trauma associated with being with her in that accident,
Right.
and seeing what I saw. So I didn't know, I dropped into deep despair and depression after that. And it was just a hole I didn't know how to get out of. And so I turned to really the only thing I knew I can turn to, of course, besides family and friends, right? But that only gets you so far. You must go deep within. And the tool to go deep within for me is music. And at my fingertips, literally at my fingertips, was this experience at the piano that I was doing already. And I had developed already, but never put to purpose, never put to use for something like this. And I didn't know if it could hold up to what I was asking it to do. I didn't know if it could rise to the task. But night after night and week after week and month after month, until at some point, not only did it help me get through it, but I experienced a profound beauty, appreciation, gratitude, and dare I say, a feeling of love that overwhelmed me on such a level that I mean, I literally had no words for it, which is why I had music for it. I mean, and even the music was like barely enough, like, hardly touched the surface. So I know what it did for me. And in that moment, this is many years ago, in that moment, I said to myself, if it could do this and if it did this for me and where I was to where I now am, and imagine what if it could be helpful to anyone then that's what I have to do. So in that moment, I just really made this profound realization and shift that this was my calling, and this is a larger purpose for what I should be doing here on this planet. And so I then start to put the steps in place to make this happen. And that's where the story of how, okay, because it wasn't called Mind Travel, it didn't have a name, it didn't have any of that. It was just my own personal thing that I did
Wow.
without anyone's knowledge. It was just for me.
Wow.
And then that's really where the story of Mind Travel, the experience people know now, that's where it begins.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. And I feel almost like one of my questions was, well, how did you know that it would work? And to me, that seems like now such a stupid question to ask because you know that it worked for you,
Right.
and it's just a matter of sharing it. So essentially, the question now
Yeah.
is, how did you begin sharing it? Okay.
So so when I finally made the choice to share it, what I did was moved across the country.
Okay.
That was the first thing I did. Now let me explain. I was living in New York, and when I made the choice to do this in a real public way, you got to remember that I was involved in different business projects, investments, and tech stuff, and doing the music in my own way, but not publicly.
Hmm.
And so when I made the choice to do that, I had to remove as much distraction from my life as I could.
Okay.
And so a key component to that was I need to focus and I need to be practicing for hours a day and I need to really create a world class experience. And I couldn't do that. I felt I couldn't do that in New York with all the distractions at my doorstep
Hmm.
from, ventures and business ideas and meetings and friends and family. And it was just so much distraction. So I sold my home. I moved to Los Angeles. I felt it was a good place because with the outdoor kind of weather, I could be home all day and not feel cooped in like you can in New York. So I moved to California. I can just keep all the windows and doors open and just play at the piano and not feel like I got to get out.
Yes.
And yeah. And I was already spending some time there a little bit, every month or two. So, I had a comfort with it. I moved there, and then I said, I thought about professional athletes, and I said, professional athletes, the best in the world, they all have full-time coaches. Yet, the best, Roger Federer, Kobe Bryant, you name it, they all have full-time coaches, and that's partially why they're the best in the world because they always have someone to push them, to challenge them, to adapt, to constantly reimagine their game. I said, how come musicians don't have that?
Right.
Considered myself a musical athlete, right? That's kind of what we are in many ways, right? We're doing technical feats that would astound Michael Jordan. so what?
Exactly.
Exactly. So why don't we have coaches past our studies?
Right.
And so I ended up finding my original coach, and
Okay, so is that coach your piano coach?
Yes, we had studied together years ago in New York, and then he moved to Europe, and we kind of lost touch for many years, and so then we got back in touch, and it was just the right time in both of our lives, and so I literally sponsored his visa, and helped him relocate his life to Los Angeles. He
Wow.
moved into my house, and became my full-time coach. He also, I also helped him get some other local students as well, and he's absolutely brilliant. His name is Paolo Tatafiore. He's just a brilliant, not only player but pedagogue, teacher, coach. Some people just have that gift of
Hmm.
being an incredible teacher. So he has that in spades, and we just play hours and hours each day, and it just gave me got my hands back and just that allowed me to develop the skills to really push what I do at the keyboard, because it's really about pushing it to that edge, which is so key in creating the magic that I try to create.
Right.
Um, so not about technical feats or technical skills for their own sake, but um, for pushing the envelope of of technique in service of the experience it creates through the patterns and music that I could kind of weave through multiple layers and voicings and patterns and rhythms and multiple rhythms and all those kind of things that 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 really lend themselves to what I'm trying to do in the minds of the participants.
Wow. So that's so fascinating to me that you really saw yourself needing a coach, because I've thought that so many times too. Like, you have a coach during your studies, but not
Mm-hmm.
for when you're creating your career.
Yeah,
and
and
that's more important, actually. That's when you're creating.
that's right.
This isn't the 4 years. This is, or 6 or whatever.
That's right.
It's the rest of the time. So.
And I'm such a collaborative creature by nature. So especially coming out of the technology world, where you must be collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
You will not thrive. You will fail in the technology world if you're non-collaborative.
Would you say
So
that's a big missing link? What in music, and you spent a lot of time, obviously, in the entrepreneurial business world.
mhm.
That sounds like a big thing that's missing in the music world. Do you have
Now
any other things?
it's present and missing in different ways, right? You have,
Right.
like, look, if you're in an orchestra, you by nature you must be collaborative. The
True.
best, today the best conductors, the best orchestral musicians are the ones that are collaborative. Um,
Right.
you know, I just finished performing with the Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra here in Los Angeles. They're conductorless.
Oh,
They're
great.
they're they're conductorless. So you've got, dozens of musicians trying
That's
to play
definitely
together.
collaborative. Yeah.
That is collaborative. Amazing. And they play phenomenally. So, so there, it does exist, but, people really have to get the importance of that.
Hmm.
Now, composers by nature are kind of isolated beings, right?
Hmm.
Because we usually write in the, dark of night, with, and alone, left to our own kind of crazy minds. But more and more, I think people are even composing together, and then, of course, once you compose, you must have a collaborative nature in order for, to work with musicians and really get the sound you're looking for,
Yeah.
from them. So it's just key. It's key to what I do, and even just in the whole process, it's like just being able to have someone give you feedback,
Mm.
and say, hey, try it this way next time. Just see how that feels,
Yeah.
try this passage that way. Like, what would that feel like? Or, hey, let's work on this technique, this piece, because it'll give you a technique that will help you with something you're trying to do. It's just, you need another set of ears, not just eyes, but ears to,
Exactly.
and to have the hubris to think that I could just do it all alone and I don't need help. It's not, again, it doesn't serve what I'm trying to do. So,
Right.
it's
Right.
just, yeah.
Well, it's definitely like you described that conductorless ensemble, and that's a self-started ensemble. I talk a lot about that on this podcast, that there's kind of those two choices. It's becoming more obvious that there's two
Yeah.
choices. You can create your own business like you have. You can start your own ensemble like the Kaleidoscope people have. I've heard of them. I haven't
Yeah.
gone too much into it yet, but I'm going to look into them. Or you can go the route of auditioning, and that's where you're separating yourself out. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in competition with everybody around me. I have to audition. I have to impress these people and get past this barrier so I can go and play my instrument. And so
Yeah.
that those are kind of the two routes that a lot of people grapple with. But I think you're such a great example of somebody who went deeper and figured out a purpose, like a true purpose for your life, which is incredible. So when you played with Kaleidoscope, was that a mind travel experience, or was it a totally different kind of concert? Was it composed? I
Yeah,
suppose
that
it.
was that was the whole night was called Mind Travel. But I did it two halves with intermission there. So that was at the Ace Theater in downtown Los Angeles, which is, an epic 1,600 seat theater. It was gorgeous. And there, the first half was composed music, and it's very tough to have an orchestra all improvising. It's a
Right.
recipe for disaster. So I've actually created some semi-improvisational scores for quintets. That's more manageable, and I give them kind of these modules and time frames, and like a semi-composed score and instructions. You can do that, but with an orchestra, it's just a lot harder. So
Yeah.
there, I actually did a fully scored, every note scored. But it came from the source material was all recordings at the piano that I had in MIDI, right, in digital format, which I was able to then parse and edit and pull out into and adapt and arrange into a full score.
Okay.
And so it has the feeling of being improvised because it was in many ways, but now it's being adapted for orchestra and scored out, and and so we're kind of like, it's like taking a photograph, right? Of we're documenting an improvisation and then arranging it for orchestra, so it has all these other colors, and it was just magnificent. So they did a great job. That was the first half, and then after intermission, it was a solo piano with accompanying visuals, which is another element of the theater mind travel experience, which are these kind of abstract artistic visual projections that are synced with the music, which you might ask, well, if the music's improvised, how do you sync it? And that's because the visuals are also improvised. So they're driven by algorithms that are listening through a microphone to the piano.
Wow.
And I have a microphone in the piano. If it's an acoustic piano, or if I'm playing electric piano, then I have a feed from the mixer going into the laptop. And then the algorithms are listening and then adapting what's on the screen, kind of like your iTunes visualizer, but imagine that times 1,000. So it's just doing some wonderful visual accompaniment to the music. And so it becomes an immersive multimedia experience in theaters.
Did that technology already exist, or?
No, and it didn't. It really has evolved, and so this is all original programming that I created with the help of a couple of talented visual software programmers, and so then it uses source material that I create, and then I can constantly evolve that. Most recently, I did a collaboration with the Brooklyn Museum, which is an iconic museum in New York, and they have the David Bowie retrospective that's taking place right now. And so they, the director of the museum, Ann Pasternak, she's incredible. She asked me to collaborate with them to see if I can come up with a mind travel experience that would pay tribute to David Bowie.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. First of all, he was the only poster I had on my wall as a 15-year-old. Okay? So I was like, okay, that's amazing. So I said, yeah. So what I ended up creating was an improvised piano that I played at the live performance with a track of curated spoken interviews from David Bowie interwoven throughout the music. So I would listen to hours and hours of David Bowie's interviews from 40 years. I picked out very carefully the phrases, the ideas that I felt exemplified his thinking throughout the years, and the goal of really getting in his head.
Wow.
And we created a 30 plus minute experience out of it, where at the end of it, hopefully you feel like you were just inside David Bowie's mind on the deepest level possible. And it came out gorgeous, and the visuals that go with it are using my algorithm software, but instead of my own visuals that I created, I took David Bowie's paintings. Turns out he was a prolific painter.
Oh my gosh.
So I took images of his paintings that he did. He did these incredible abstract expressionist paintings, especially when he was living in Berlin. And I took images of them, put them in the software, and so now they appear and they start to move and dance with the music and his voice. It's really cool.
Oh my gosh. Is that a recording that people can see, or was it a live experience?
It was live. We did record it, and we're going to post that up hopefully soon for people to check out as well. But it's I'm
on
very proud
website?
of it. And
Would that be on your website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be on the website, and certainly if they sign up for the email list, we'll let them know about it.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, I'll make sure I have the link to your website. I assume if you go to the website, there's an opportunity to sign up for an email list.
Yeah, it's right. It's right on the homepage at the bottom there. It's just mindtravel.com. It's very easy.
That's fantastic. I'm convinced that I want to go immediately to a mind travel experience. So when you started, I'll go back to some sort of nitty gritty stuff. When you first started, I know that you were pretty successful in your startup in the tech world. Were you funding your own concerts at that point?
Yeah, and in the beginning, it really it didn't really require uh, much resources,
Mm-hmm.
and even to date, I still haven't spent $1 on advertising
Wow.
to audiences. I mean, outside of a $25 Facebook post maybe,
Right.
but that's about it. So
So it's
so
really word of mouth.
it's all been word of mouth, and it all started in my living room in Los Angeles
Mm.
exactly 4 years ago this coming month, May.
Wow.
And I basically said, okay, you know what? I've been practicing, I've been getting my chops back, and I feel like I'm ready to share an experience. And I invited about 40 people over, and it was friends, and some of them brought people, so it was friends and friends of friends, and everyone kind of sat in my living room, on the floor, on couches, on chairs, and wherever we can fit them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, I hope you enjoy this experience. It's something I'm calling mind travel. And I called it that because I was sitting at my dining room table and I was trying to create a name for the experience, right? I wanted people to come have an experience versus come see me, what I can do, right? It's
Mm.
more, again, like we were talking about before, I want to give them an experience. So if you name an experience, it really goes a long way towards allowing them to have one.
Right.
So I called it mind travel because I felt it was descriptive enough of it's something that happens in your mind, and it's like going on this journey. So that's where the name came from, and I came up with it sitting at my dining room table, and it just stuck. And so I invited them to the first ever mind travel, and they came, and it was about a 30-ish minute experience, and then afterwards I asked a friend to videotape kind of one by one in the other room, like a short 1 minute interview where people can share what they felt about it. What was their experience? How would they describe it?
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, I watched this video. It's about 15 people who we interviewed. And one after another, I was so moved by how much they were moved. A couple of people on the interview were crying.
Wow.
That's someone who's crying, thinking about the experience in which they cried. So
Wow.
it's like, I was like, okay, I thought people might find it interesting, maybe, like think it was cool, but I didn't think they were going to connect with it on that deep of a level, that emotional of a level. And certainly for some, that spiritual of a level. With some of the interviews, what they said was just really profoundly moved me. And I said, okay, well, we have to do this again. And there was two rules I promised myself from the beginning, which I've mostly over the past 4 years adhered to. The first is making sure that the experience was always true to me, to the experience that I used to do when no one was listening, like that just worked for me, that was true to who I am, and not let me try to create something I think people are going to like.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, is not the sound is business sense advice that I could give. So, like if you were to ask me as an entrepreneur hat, putting my entrepreneur hat on, like, what advice would you give an entrepreneur? I would be
Right.
like, be customer driven.
Right.
I would be like, go talk to your potential customers, find out what they need, and make it.
Right.
And so, in many ways, I did the opposite of that. However, having said that, it's different in the artistic world, in the music world, where the person you first and foremost must be true to is yourself. Because if you're not, whatever you do on that stage will not translate.
It's an
It won't translate.
authenticity. The authenticity.
Yeah, it won't translate.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't translate, they're not going to get it. And then you're going to wonder, well, why don't they get it? This is what they said they wanted, but it's not what you want. So you really have to figure out what it is you want, what you want to say, how you want to say it. And if you can figure out that formula for you, and it's different for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
like you can copy what I do tomorrow, and it probably won't translate because it's not their thing. It's not their
Right.
voice. It's not what they're doing.
Right.
So that's that was the first rule, and the second rule was to do my best to always have fun with it, because it's just so easy to get caught up in the details and in the just the trenches of all the craziness that takes place with producing live events and rejection from something you want to do and they say no, and then all the crazy stuff that happens, technical blow-ups,
Right.
issues with you name it, we've experienced it.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of live performing. And I just promised myself to always, have fun with it, see the bigger picture. And doesn't mean there's not stress at times. Anything worthwhile that we do must have stress, because otherwise we're not pushing ourselves hard enough. It's about how we manage through that stress, how we cope with that stress. It's not about having no stress. Having no stress is being dead. Then you have no stress.
Exactly.
And then you will then have no stress. So that's coming. I promise that's coming, but not yet.
So, what do you see for the I love those two rules, by the way, because they just, I think they really, I was going to ask the next question. I was like, wait a second. I love those two rules because as you were describing growing this and creating these experiences, you kind of answered the two things I was wondering about, because it takes a lot to put on such a huge program. It takes a lot to organize it all. There's a lot of, so to keep in mind that to have fun, and which must be hard at times, but you have to keep that energy and that spirit in order to create that experience you're putting out there for the participants, because that's where it comes from. It's generating from your energy. So that's such a great place to come from in the concerts that you're creating. What do you have for what do you have coming up? Like, what do you see for the future of Mind Travel?
So, I always have my kind of bucket list of dream, places and projects. Central Park is just such, I'm from New York, so Central Park is such an iconic location. It's the heart of New York City. It's where nature and the greatest city on earth meet. And so, on May 10th, in just a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, we're bringing it to Central Park with the headphones, and we're going to have just an incredible time creating the Mind Travel in Central Park. So that's coming up coming up just in a few weeks on May 10th, and then we're taking it to incredible cities in their respective iconic locations, like in San Francisco, and everyone in San Francisco knows Crissy Field. It's the park at the Golden Gate Bridge. It's just looking at the bay and the bridge. And so it took us 2 years. We got the permit and relationship with the city to do it there, and we're bringing it for a massive audience of people mind traveling together. It's just going to be beautiful. And so that's coming up on June 2nd. And so we're just going city to city, bringing this experience to folks, and always looking to do more. And it's not just about the size of these events. And yes, there's an energy, there's a power when you create that field with so many people, right? You create that energy field. And it's like a property of physics in a way, and it's gorgeous in that sense. But there's something, to me, equally powerful about the intimate salon style mind travels that I do, which I do often in all cities I go to. I just came back from Tel Aviv, and I did 3 of them there for audience of 50, 60 people, in a home with a piano. That's it. Just simple, a piano and people sitting on couches and lying on the floor, and just all sharing music.
So can people call you up? Can people call you up and say, "Hey Murray, I really want you to come to my city. I have 75 people who want to hear you, and I have this home that can fit people. They're all going to sit on floor pillows, and I have this Bosendorfer piano. Will you come? Will you please come?" Like, does that happen?
So yes, it does happen. And of course, we selectively will accept those when we feel it's right, and certainly when it fits within my travel schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, if someone wanted me to travel halfway around the world just for that and come back, I probably couldn't do it. Although
Right.
I would want to, but I couldn't. But if I'm already going to a city and I need to be there anyway for another big performance or some other event, then and we can fit it in during that trip, yes, I would do that. And what's nice is that the host either makes a contribution to Mind Travel or they ticket the event so that it supports the work that we do. Because in addition to the concerts we do at these theaters and locations, I also have the Mind Travel Foundation, which I just established at the end of last year. And we want to bring Mind Travel also to communities and people in need that can't afford it, or they don't have the logistics or the ability to get to the places we go to. So I want to bring it to senior homes, to veterans, to inner city schools, to communities that I feel can really benefit from it. Again, in the same way that I described the way I benefited from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know they, and we do that in a limited way now, and I want to expand the number of those that we do.
That's fantastic. How do you get enough headphones?
Yeah, that's a good question. We keep making more. So we literally just imported from China, where I have a factory that makes them for me. We make our own Mind Travel headphones, and we just imported another 1,000. It just arrived the other day. So yeah, we're constantly growing it and just looking at how we can transport people and create as much magic as possible.
That's so amazing. Well, I just want to end with I just have to say this. I might sound really kind of woo-woo when I say this, but I just feel like you're raising the vibration of the planet when you have these massive amounts of people hearing it in nature at the same time, connecting with one another like on a personal level, but also doing in something for themselves on a deep level too. I just think it's such important work, and I'm totally moved just by having this conversation with you, and I'm so excited that my little podcast can hopefully spread the word even more, and more people can find out about your work.
Wonderful.
So,
thank you so much for having me and
much.
allowing me to share my story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show, Murray.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay. Bye.